Andrew is the executive director at East 72 Holdings and has come in today on fire, ready to jump into this. And Andrew, we usually have 4 questions that we kick off with, but you've said that there's a bit of background here that you want to get stuck into first. So where do you want to kick off?
I want to kick off with the fact that there's a massive investment lesson for everybody in Catapult, which is that you need what's called second level thinking. If you want to understand what that is, you can get Howard Marks from Oaktree's Memo up, 9th of September 2015, and he explains what second level thinking is. It's clearly that you don't just look at the obvious, that you dig underneath the obvious, okay, to the next level and then the next level again. And what you'll see when I go through the run-up to Catapult and Catapult itself is we're using that level of thinking. So the second aspect of Catapult is Catapult was created or founded in 2006. The most formative moment that lays out Catapult's business and why it exists and why it can exist and why it has a massive runway happened in late 1991 in the UK.
Nice.
Okay. Yeah. Why? Why are we going back 32 years? What happened in late 1991 is that the rights for UK soccer were coming up in 1992, and the incumbent TV company, which was ITV, was paying £11 million a year to broadcast what was then called Division 1 live games. The major clubs in the UK said, that's ridiculous, we need much more money to sign a new contract for 1992. And of course, that was the genesis of the biggest monster in world sport, the English Premier League. Okay, what happened? So 11 million quid a year. There were various bids and people started negotiating. The clubs got involved, and the FA, which did not run the Football League then, okay, got involved. And of course, along came Rupert Murdoch, and Murdoch agreed to pay 60 million quid a year over the next 5 years for live games in the English Premier League to bolster B-Sky B, which was still fledgling. Okay, so the price of sport went up 5-fold in the UK. In 1993, Murdoch used exactly the same tactics to take away the NFL from CBS, who'd had it for 56 years.
Wow.
You just bid it out of the park. Okay, because as Rupert Murdoch said in 1993, you don't beat live sport with old movies. And he's absolutely right. And if you look at virtually every sporting strategy across the world, it's basically to bid for the key sport in that market. So in America, it's the NFL. Obviously, the other sports are relevant and interesting, but they're much more regional. NFL fits the bill. In England, it's the Premier League. It's a strategy that's used by Vincent Bolloré of Bolloré and Vivendi. It's exactly the same thing. He's got rid of French Ligue 1 soccer. They only want the Premier League, and of course, he's taking over the major streamer in Africa. So this is a well-known strategy. What does that mean? What that means is, it means that sport is investable, because there's so much money in it. It's being paid for by media companies and, of course, now streamers. Okay? So in 2008, Abu Dhabi bought Manchester City. It's the amount of money. In 2011, Qatar bought Paris Saint-Germain. And obviously, a couple of years ago, Saudi bought Newcastle United. To give you an idea now, from that 60 million quid a year, the UK Premier League rights are £1.67 billion a year just for the UK. And the international rights, which in 1992 was zero, are now £1.76 billion a year. In other words, more than the UK rights. That's what's driving everything in sport, okay? So there are 5 or 6 key changes to the landscape in the last 5 or 6 years. First of all, professional investment in sport, which was previously non-existent. There's no way professional funds would have invested in sport. So to give you an idea, only 2 of the 2024-25 English Premier League teams are owned by English people.
And when we say 2, it's 2 of 20.
2 of 20.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're Brentford and Brighton. I've told you before, both the guys that own those made all their money from sports betting. Okay. All right. 7 of the 20 teams are US owned. Okay, usually by private equity or a high net worth, very ultra high net worth individual. Okay, so they're in. The second key change to the landscape is the massive salaries and payments to the players. Okay, the players are the biggest winners out of this, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Okay.
For context, for people who aren't familiar with footballing salaries, they get talked about in how much they get paid in a week.
Yeah.
Because they get paid so much, like £900,000 a week.
Yeah, absolutely. And that works, of course, you know that in the NFL as well. So it's exactly the same across American sport. You know the salaries there. So there's only one sport where the assets can be sold, of course, and that's football, soccer. Okay, where you can actually sell, your star player to another club for, many hundreds of millions of pounds. So the most expensive player in the UK Premier League is Declan Rice, who moved from West Ham to Arsenal for 105 million quid. The third thing is, so how do you invest? There's that. The third thing is sports betting. Sports betting's been liberalised everywhere, okay? And it's grown very, very sharply everywhere. But there's one thing you need in sports betting, and you can see here we're getting a bit closer to catapult. You need data. You actually want to know how many passes Declan Rice made, how much running Declan Rice did, how many shots on goal Declan Rice had. And that guides you. I'll give you the hint. The 2 guys that own Brighton and Brentford were one of the first originators of sports data in football. Okay, they helped create what's called XG, expected goals. Okay, and they used to bet on the basis of expected goals between the 2 teams. Okay, so there's loads of data stats. Now I'll come on to who creates those a bit later on. The fourth thing is the change in media distribution. This stuff is now getting out of the hands of free-to-air. It's moved categorically to streamers.
I think the best case study of this right now is the NBA rights that are being negotiated, and Amazon and everyone wants
Absolutely right. This is why I've been excited by NBA, and I've been excited in the past by Madison Square Garden Sports, who own the Knicks, and the Knicks are actually half good again, so that's a start. So the NBA is the big kahuna, to be blunt now. NFL's still obviously the big gorilla in the room, but the NBA, because of now its rights being negotiated, as Alex says, it's really important to understand the streamers are now playing. So sport is going to be distributed by Apple TV, by Google, by Netflix, and by other guys in this, as well as specialist over-the-air streamers like B-Sky B in the UK and obviously KO. Look at how sports changed in Australia. You've gone from having Fox Sports to Fox Sports streaming, which is KO.
Yeah.
It's changed completely in the space of what? Year and a bit?
Yeah, it's shit for consumers. This is a side point, but in Australia, it's actually now Optus Sport, KO, and Stan Sports if you want what you previously had.
Yeah. I'm sorry to tell you, if you think the anti-siphoning legislation is going to carry on forever, it ain't. Okay? So, I mean, free-to-air television in Australia has got to reshape itself completely because it only exists off news, reality TV, and sport. Yeah. And the sports rights are too expensive for them. They don't make money. So that's a problem. And the fifth thing, and this is really relevant for Catapult, what are the big new things that are being monetised in sport? Only in the last 2 to 3 years, and one is literally this week. We're recording this on the 31st of May. The first is women. Women's sport is now huge. It's credible. It is big business for television, okay? Women's football, in particular, in the UK is massive. And, of course, well, in Australia, we kind of have a team to be proud of. We got our players. We've got 3 Matildas play for Arsenal. Arsenal, when they play Spurs, in the women's game, they put the game on Emirates. It sells out.
Yeah.
60,000 people go watch Arsenal women play big games. And it's the same with Man City women, and it's the same with Chelsea women, who are obviously the benchmark in the UK. So women's sport and US women's sport is coming back. It's been through lulls, but it's coming back, particularly in basketball. Ever heard of Caitlin Clark?
Yes. Who hasn't? Yeah.
Who hasn't? Well, that's why. There's now a women's national hockey league. And I've got to tell you, to be blunt, blokes love watching women, knock each other around, rugby league, football of one sort or another, and obviously ice hockey coming up. The second thing is US college sport. This week it's announced that US college athletes can be paid. Okay, and there's the NCAA have settled a lawsuit against them for basically, in effect, stealing the athletes' money. Okay, so there's going to be back payments made of over $2.7 billion to NCAA athletes, which is most obviously football. If you've been to America, college football is gargantuan. Hold that thought, okay, because it's relevant to Catapult. So, how do you invest in all this sporty stuff?
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.